Hey guys, welcome to the Love of Books, Movies, and Happiness. My name's April, and today we're starting a review of a new series that I just got into. I thought it was a book on its own, and so I picked it up from the library. Then I realized that originally it was part of a trilogy. Like, okay, I can do a trilogy. I like 3 books. It's a good way to do a story and have a nice ending to it. Then I find out that instead of just being a trilogy, it has expanded beyond a trilogy and is now more or less a series. And apparently, the 5th book in the series just came out, I believe, earlier this year, possibly last year. I know it said July, but I'm not 100% on the year. I'll have to check into that and add that into my video as needed. So I'm sure quite a few of you will be familiar with this. There will be some, like me, who've either never heard of it or you just never picked it up to check it out. And it is called A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And this is book 1 in the trilogy turned series, also known as the All Souls series, because it starts out with the people being in the All Souls College. It's an odd name for a college, but it is what it is. So I was looking for a new book to read. That was my whole thing. I've been on a kick of trying to find new authors and new books I haven't picked up before. And I'm like, I like witches. I like vampires. I like reading about them. Let's check it out. Now, this is just based off of my first read through of the book. Normally, I try and read a book at least 2 times before I review it. But in this case, this is just based off of my first read through of this book. Now, The Discovery of Witches, as you can see, it's a very thick book. It is 43 chapters and 579 pages from start to finish, which for some of us, that's not an issue. For those that it takes a little longer to read the bigger books, this may be one you put on your list for when you have more time, or you just do it in bite size. You can also find this in audio, so you could pick it up in audio and just listen to it. And after doing some research, I did find out there is a series, like a television series based off of these books. I do not know if it is any good or not. I have not had a chance to watch any of it, but it is also out there. That is something I will down the road be looking into and seeing if it compares to the books at all and how it does. If you've seen that series on TV or Netflix or wherever you can find it, then please let me know if it's worth watching. Does it compare to the books? Or in your mind, is it another one that just kind of, Let me know though. Alright, so Discovery of Witches. When we first meet our main character, Dianna Bishop. She's a professor who's doing a research paper, and she's in her local library. It's the school library where she's trying to get research material for her next lecture she has to do. And while she's looking for her research material, she ends up pulling down a book that she's requested. It's one of those where in order to get some of the more older text and the more fragile books, you have to go up to the librarian submit a request of what books you're looking for, and then they let you know that your books are ready, and you take your books and go and do your research and then turn them back in when you're done. So that's what she does. She picks up, requests a book called the Ashmold, I believe, which I think I am saying that wrong, but it is something like that. It's either Ashmold or Ashmold. But it's an ancient book that she needs a few reference material from. But she notices when she gets it, there's something odd about it. There's a feel to it that's just a little bit different. Now, Dianna isn't just a professor. She is also a witch. However, she is a witch who refuses to actually use or learn her magic. And it's not because she's afraid of it. Well, I take that back. She is kind of afraid of her magic. But when she was a child, she lost her family. Her mother and father were killed, and at their funeral, she overheard other witches from the local coven talking about how it was their magic that killed them, and they died because of their magic. Therefore, as a child, she decided, I'm not going to practice magic then. It got my parents killed. So up until now, she has refused to willingly use any of her natural born talents that she has. When she's not aware that she's doing it, or she's not thinking about it or sleeping, then she'll do magic. It's almost like it's a compulsion for her and she can't not do it. She's just not aware of exactly what she's doing and when. So she's familiar with the idea of magic and that there are books out there that are protected by spells. But she's not happy to have her hands on one. And for her, it's just a book. She finds the notes that she needs for her paper, copies down what she needs to write down, and then quickly returns the book back to the library so that she can get it off of her hands rather than deal with whatever magic she feels around the book. She's not aware, however, that by getting her hands on the book to begin with, she's causing a whole bunch of interest within the magical community, if you will. Fellow witches, vampires, demons, they're all interested in this book. It is essentially the book of beginnings for them. It's like their creation story. And she's not aware of this. To her, it's just a bewitched book she needs to get rid of. But she quickly learns that by making it accessible again and bringing it out and requesting it, it activated its magic to where everyone's aware that it's out there now. So of course now she's getting followed. The local witches are trying to figure out, and wizards, are trying to figure out just how she unlocked the spell on it that was hiding it. The demons and the vampires are simply wanting to get their hands on it when she's done with it. Unfortunately for her, she didn't do anything specific. She just requested it and it showed up. She apparently met whatever conditions were part of the spell that's on it, but she doesn't know what she did to meet those conditions. Well, it's not even, I'd say, a day or two later, maybe a week, where she meets Matthew. He's also known as Professor Claremont, also known as Matthew Royden, Matthew Claremont, Matthew de Claremont, of a very ancient, well-to-do family, also nicknamed Shadow, among other names that he goes by. And Matthew isn't just any professor. He is a professor of genetics. He's also a vampire. He's one of the first ones to approach her about the book. And when he explains that he's a professor of genetics and wants the book to help understand the vampire genetics a little bit better, she has to explain she doesn't know how she got the book, just that she requested it, and she doesn't know how to get it back. Because when she goes to request it again, she's informed that they don't have that book anymore and haven't for a very long time. So then for her, she's now left at the question of what to do because everyone wants their hands on the book. So then they end up getting to know one another. It starts out where he takes her out for coffee, and while they're out for coffee, he kind of explains why the book is so important to all the different creatures. But his problem is she doesn't know how she got it. She doesn't know how to recognize the other creatures around her, and she doesn't know how to use her magic to protect herself, which confuses him. The fact that she's a witch with the extreme amount of powers that she has, and she doesn't use them, just really doesn't make sense to him. As they go along throughout their days trying to find the book again, he starts to get a better understanding of her, but it takes him most of the book to fully understand how she thinks and why she does the things that she does. Within this book, there are a couple storylines. You have, of course, the storyline of the book that suddenly appeared and trying to find it again. And then you have the love story between Dianna and Matthew. Will they get together? Will it go any further than just being friends? Well, that's a good question. Because within the drama of the book, there's also the drama of the fact that due to an agreement reached between all the various magical creatures a long time ago, there was an agreement put down that witches and vampires could not get together and have a relationship. Well, up until now for Dianna, that hasn't been a thing or a problem. But with Matthew, that's a different situation, because almost from day one of meeting her, he is very, very protective, almost overly protective of everything around her, to the point that he brings in cousins and friends to help keep an eye on her and watch over her when he's not around. And she is finding herself attracted to him. The people in her life, her aunts who raised her and who are also witches, are not thrilled. The local witch coven is definitely not thrilled. And Matthew's family isn't entirely thrilled with any of this happening. But what are you going to do? Two different people fall in love, they don't want to be told that they can't be together. So within this, you have the two storylines that are they just are really well woven together. To where it's a slow building relationship. The book is the main storyline, and then the relationship kind of builds into it and becomes its own storyline. Which, nothing wrong with that. Being that this is the first book in what was supposed to be a trilogy, there is understandably a cliffhanger in the last chapter that leads to the second book, the Book of Life. Overall, for this book, I give it a 4.8 stars. It is a well-written, well-researched, and well-thought-out story. This is not something where it popped into her head and she sat down, spent an hour researching, and then started writing. This is obviously something where she has a good background knowledge of a wide variety of areas, and she put all of that to use. This isn't a quick peek into a world. This is a full-on immersion into this world, which is formed around our world. It's just the idea that vampires, witches, demons, they all just walk around our world as we do. They interact with us and we just don't know it, which I'm fine with that. She was not afraid to write a story that is complex in the fact that you're gonna have the ones where it's like, well, you're a witch, but you're this kind of witch, so I'm better than you because I'm this kind of witch. You have the vampires that are going, well, we're the top of the food chain. Which, to me, witches, vampires can kind of balance each other out. It just depends. But because this is a well-written, well-described book, I give it the 4.8 stars. However, I will add as a side note, when my first reading of this, and I will be rereading this just to make sure I didn't miss anything, but for the first, I would say about 10 chapters, which is about this much of the book, it took me those first 10 to 11 chapters to fully get into this story. It wasn't nothing against the story. It's not a quick jump into the story, which is fine. I don't mind a slow build into the story. It's just, it took me to those first 10 chapters to decide if I was even going to continue reading this. Not because it's bad. It wasn't fully pulling me in right away. I appreciate world building. I appreciate taking the time to make sure that the reader has a full understanding of the character they're reading about and the world they're entering. Especially something as complex as this world. I get that. I just, like I said, for the first 10 chapters or so, I literally sat there going, am I going to continue reading this? It's got a good start, but it was such a slow build at first. The fact that, I try to give a book at least a full way through before I refused to read it again was the only thing that kept me going. Once I hit chapter, I'd say 11 or 12, and it actually started to, really make some sense and start to build on each other, and you started to get into the actual meat of the story, then I was like, okay, now I'm starting to get into this. I'm starting to understand it better. It's pulling at me. Let's get to the next chapter. However, by the end of the book, I even told my husband this. I'm like, yeah, I'm into it. I want to see what happens next. But I don't fully know what I think of the first book. And even going into the second book, in the back of my mind was the question of, did I fully like this book? Having read book 2 and book 3 and kind of skimmed through this one on my e-reader a couple times just to keep it fresh in my memory, I do like this book a lot. It's one I can respect because it's not just a fast jump into a story and then it's not bam, 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 action, action, action. She takes time to make sure that it's as if it was happening in real life. So it's a nice slow build until the action starts. Then admittedly it goes into action, action, action. But by that point you're ready for that. So I would definitely say if you're looking for a fantasy world to get into, one that is going to leave you entertained, admittedly confused, and also expecting more and looking forward to more, well, this is definitely the book to pick up. It will pull you in. This is not a book, however, where I would say, for those who like to read several books at once. And I admire you for that. This is not one of those books where you can do that. You need your full attention on this series to understand what is happening. You cannot sit there and be like, I'm going to read a chapter of this, and then I'm going to read a chapter of another book. No, because then you will be very confused and very lost. So you definitely need to keep this as your full main book. Then go back to your reading multiples at once. But just give this your full attention when you have time to read, so that you understand what all is going on. And don't, there are some where you can stop in the middle of a chapter at like a sentence and you know exactly where you stopped at and it still makes sense when you go back to it. This is not one you can do that with either. If you're going to stop, at least try and get to the next chapter before you stop. Otherwise, you're going to have to start back at the beginning chapter and catch yourself up before you continue reading. Trust me, I figured that out quickly. Alright guys, if you have read any of the books in the All Souls series, let me know. I am more than happy to talk about books. Definitely looking for someone to talk about with this book series, as I fully admit the series itself firmly has me in its hooks. And I haven't had a series hook into me like this since, I'd say the first time I read the Harry Potter series. That was one of those series where as soon as the next book came out, I was there for it and staying up all night reading. Sadly, I can't do that now. The perks of being a kid versus being an adult. But it's been a long time since a series has hooked me to the point that I'm impatiently waiting for the next book to come out, which is coming out, like I said, I believe it came out either this July or last year's July, but I am on a 2-week hold for it. And I have seen on social media that there are several people saying that bookstores have it. So I'm assuming it's already fully out. And if that's the case, then I can't wait until someone finishes it so I can get my hands on it. Alright guys, if you enjoy this book review, then please go check out my other reviews. As I'm sure you'll notice from my playlist, I have a wide variety of books that I like to read. Everything from fantasy to romance to fiction, it's all in there. And little by little, I'm adding a variety of books that I review to my list every time. So please go check out those, like, subscribe, and hit the bell button. And until next time, guys, keep reading.